This is going to sound dramatic, but today's episode will be the most important episode in the history of this channel. It's the day that I reveal a secret that, to the best of my knowledge, has been hiding in plain sight for over 70 years. Now, I can't say for certain that I'm the first to ever discover this, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that what I'm going to reveal to you today will change the way that you read the Voyage of the Dawn Treader for the rest of your life. So stay tuned. Now, speaking of the rest of your life, in this day and age, it's hard enough to know what today brings, let alone to predict what tomorrow's going to bring. That's why it's so important for students to prepare for a future at a place like Voyage College, the sponsor of today's episode. You see, predicting what work will look like in a world that's inundated with change is pretty much impossible, but preparing for that world is not. Because students who build their college experience upon the foundations of eternal truths will be faithfully equipped for whatever comes their way. Voyage College exists to train, educate, and prepare students to serve Christ faithfully throughout the entirety of their lives, no matter where God calls them. These goals are accomplished by focusing on 3 educational outcomes for every graduate: keeping faith first, becoming future ready, and growing more kingdom focused. Now, to learn how keeping faith first produces graduates who are future ready and kingdom focused, please go to boyscollege.com/faith. Now, one thing we can predict is that today's episode is going to be one of the best. So let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and journey to a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. We're going to start out today with a quick recap, and if you haven't seen the first episode, I put the link in the description below. Now, do yourself a favor and watch it first. You'll be glad you did. Now, if you have seen the last episode, you'll remember that we were talking about the 7 lost lords of Narnia. Specifically, we saw that each lord faced a trial in which they ultimately failed. After all, that's why they're called the Lost Lords of Narnia. And thanks to the excellent insight by Dr. Thomas L. Martin, whose paper is linked also in the description below, we saw that each of these trials seemed to correspond with one of the 7 deadly sins. Now, I say seem to because there were a few problems in the theory, but without Dr. Martin's groundbreaking work, I would not have discovered the final piece of this puzzle, so credit where credit's due. Now, more on that later. For now, let's talk about the final of these lost 3 lords: Lord Revilion, Lord Mavromorn, and Lord Argos. Now, like I said in the last episode, this is where I originally got tripped up when trying to decipher the meaning of these lost lords on my own, because these 3 men were all found on the same island, in the same location, and in the exact same condition. Namely, they were found on Remendu's island, seated at Aslan's table and held fast in an enchanted and seemingly unbreakable sleep. But there are clues if you look hard enough. And according to Dr. Martin, these clues begin when Caspian tries to wake up the lords. "We can try," said Caspian, and began shaking the nearest of all 3 sleepers. For a moment, everyone thought that he was going to be successful, for the man breathed hard and muttered, "I'll go eastward no more. Out oars for Narnia." But he sank back almost at once into a yet deeper sleep than before. That is, his heavy head sagged a few inches lower towards the table, and all efforts to rouse him again were useless. With the second, it was much the same. "We weren't born to live like animals. Get to the east while you have a chance. Land's behind the sun," and sank down. And the third only said, "Mustard, please," and slept hard. Now later on, Remendu's daughter tells us even more about these men. That one man wanted to give up and return to Narnia. One wanted to sit down at the table and just eat, probably. And the third, in anger, picked up the stone knife to attack the other 2. Now, this last sin is obviously wrath, and the one before that is probably gluttony. I mean, the guy even asked for more mustard in his sleep. So that gives us 6 of the 7 sins and leaves only sloth. And though we understand it as just laziness today, it actually has more to do with a neglectful listlessness, a lack of care for one's spiritual duties. Now that perfectly describes the first lord, who wanted to abandon his journey at the very end and just head for home. So we have the final 3 of the 7 sins, but exactly which lord succumbed to which evil? Well, the book isn't very clear here, but there are again some clues in the names. I'll just go ahead and tell you that by process of elimination, you'll see that Mavromorn is probably gluttony, I couldn't really figure that name out. I know that some people say that it means dark morn, but I don't understand the connection there. But the name Revilian is almost certainly a derivative of the word revile, meaning to attack with abusive language. I mean, this guy certainly has issues with wrath for sure. And the name Argos, well, in Greek, it means lazy, shunning the labor which one ought to perform. Yes, Argos is definitely the one that fell to the sin of sloth. And so it would seem that we've successfully matched all 7 of the deadly sins with all 7 of the trials that the lords and the crew of the Dawn Treader faced on their journey, right? Well, not quite. I mean, first of all, if you remember in the previous episode, I mentioned that connecting the trials of the Dark Island with the evil of envy seemed like a bit of a stretch. It just didn't sit right with me. And then there was the other thing. There weren't really 7 trials that the crew of the Dawn Treader encountered. There were 8. Did you forget about the island of the Duffers? On this island, Lucy faced possibly her greatest temptation in the house of the magician. There, she nearly cast a spell that promised to make her more beautiful than any mortal. And if it wasn't for Aslan's intervention, she would have fallen for the spell herself. Then she did fall for another spell where she was able to hear what others truly thought of her. Now that one bruised her ego in the process. This was obviously an important trial in the story, and even if it didn't result in the downfall of one of the Lost Lords, we know that it was one of the islands that they passed through on their way to the others. And so we have to ask the question, what if there were 8 sins instead of 7? Well, many times in the past, when I've come across a connection in Narnia that doesn't exactly fit, I stop and I remind myself that Lewis was a medievalist and a rich lover of history. And then I ask the question, what would the medievals think about this? It turns out that the 7 deadly sins aren't the oldest list of sins out there. They were a product of the 14th century, but were based on a much older collection that was actually very popular in the medieval era. It was written in the 4th century by a mystic monk named Evagrius Ponticus. Now, this list contained not 7, but 8 evils, and it was known as the 8 evil thoughts or temptations. And here's the thing, it only differs from the 7 deadly sins very slightly, but you're not going to believe the differences. For one, it adds the temptation of vainglory. Yes, the very same temptation that Lucy encountered in her 2 spells on the Magician's Island. And what's the other difference? Well, remember that pesky old connection with envy and the Dark Island? Well, in Ponticus' list, instead of envy, it's sorrow or despair. Now, is that a much better fit for the Dark Island? A place described as filled with a cold, thick, and inescapable darkness. Now, it was said to make your dreams become real, but I don't think that those were meant to be fantasies of riches or pleasure. I mean, just look at the only 2 dreams that were mentioned by the tempted members of the Dawn Treader crew. One was filled with regret, wishing that his love would have married him long ago, and the other dreamed that his friend would still be alive. Now, this was a place that fed on the seemingly inescapable evil of grief, regret, sadness, and despair. And there it is. If you understand each of these trials to represent one of the 8 evil temptations, the whole model matches up perfectly. Now, is it possible that this is just a nice coincidence, that any type of evil could be applied if you squint your eyes and tilt your head? Well, I guess I might agree if there wasn't one last piece of evidence, and this is the final nail in the coffin, the silver bullet. You see, when it comes to the 8 evil thoughts, Ponticus was very adamant that they be listed in a particular order, with gluttony being the first and pride being the last. So now let's look at those 7 lords again. Now, one of the 7 lords whose names has never been deciphered to my knowledge was Lord Octasian, the lord who fell into pride on Dragon Island. Now, the name Octasian is totally made up. It doesn't appear anywhere else but in this story in particular. Now, some have tried to explain that it resembles the name of the first Roman emperor, Octavian, who was definitely a prideful ruler. But I think that that's a stretch too. I mean, if Lewis wanted to use Octavian, he wouldn't have gone to the trouble of making up a random name. No, like everything else Lewis did, this was intentional. So let's break down the name. The prefix oct obviously means 8, and the suffix Esian means practitioner or one who practices. So Octasian's name literally means one who practices number 8, the 8th evil, pride. Now, without using the 8 evil model, this name would make no sense at all. This has to be the answer to the riddle without a doubt. So there you have it. It's the Rosetta Stone of the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and I guarantee you, if you go back and reread the book, you'll never read it the same again. But why does this really matter? Why would C.S. Lewis go to all of this trouble? Maybe the better question is, what was C.S. Lewis trying to tell us? Well, I think one of the first things to realize is that for Lewis, the story, told as an old Irish imrum, was about the journey even more than it was about the destination. The whole point was to teach the lessons that would equip the travelers when they returned home to face the challenges of the real world. Lewis himself said it was a story about the spiritual life, where the quest would take us to Aslan's table, and one day to Aslan's country. But only if we overcame the trials and the temptations that are common to us all. And make no mistake, the dangers are very real. But in every trial, every temptation, help is there, waiting to come to the rescue, waiting to guide you onward to the journey's end. And that's the message you should never, ever forget. Today's important episode couldn't have happened without the help from my supporters at Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel and make more videos like this, consider giving by visiting patreon.com/intothewardrobe.